Hey, this is Hugh, talking to you live from the cave of techno sadness and broken musical dreams. And yeah, this is my synth setup, and I thought I'd tell you how I made this most recent track and get into the technical nitty gritty of how these sounds came to be and maybe what I was thinking when I made them. I guess to start out with, the finished product, or finished as we call it, maybe even abandoned product, um, is completely different to where I started with it, which is a lot of the time what happens. I started out analyze or trying to analyze certain breakbeats and basically figure out where everything is on the grid and how far from the actual grid lines certain elements of it fall, and then how do I recreate that sort of feeling of actually being played on the Arturia microbrew. Um, and well, just put it simply, none of that ended up with in here, but I did end up with some elements from that track. But I was looking at the breakbeat called Hot Pants. I think Bobby Bird it is, and I was looking at the more specifically, I was looking at the tambourine in that, and yeah, just figuring out how to do it on grid and where which notes fall off grid and by how far, and then see if I could put that in just a gridded format. Um, and so, yeah, I did that and sort of scored it out on the BeatStep Pro, and it ended up feeding the different elements of that into, or I guess different drum sounds of that, feeding the triggers of that into various different analog synth drum modules, and seeing where that went. And what I settled on was taking the hi hat sound and putting it into one of these peaks modules. Um, and I guess I tuned it to a point where I liked it, and oh, how was the camera going off? Tuned it to a point where I liked it, and just built everything else around that. And eventually, the break got taken away and replaced with something else. Um, and um, yeah, and then I basically was like, I'm going to put some guitar textures and loops over that. And I think I said this last time, but the sort of guitar loops I look for aren't licks or riffs or full melodies. They're more simple repeating notes, and maybe notes without even the transient, that kind of thing. Um, and what I use for loops is this guy here, the 2HP loop, and that's a really cool module. It's basically just like a guitar loop station with some functions in it which are more geared towards the modular system. And yeah, I just fed the guitar into that and was playing around. And then I started feeding the guitar through this guy first, this digital delay thing that cost me $40 on eBay Australia, very cheap. Um, and that is a good unit for $40, and it's just a good unit in general. And what I ended up doing is I ended up just playing notes, just random notes on the fretboard, and letting them ring out. And as they were ringing out, I was playing with the timing on here, on the digital delay, so you get that nice bending sound in there. And that's a sound I really like, but obviously when you hit record, you're playing the guitar, so you don't really get that. So yeah, I just sort of was trying to capture that. And so I fed the delayed signal into the loop, and I just started playing around to see what I came up with. And the first thing I came up with was this guy. Don't know how well that's. There you go. You get two shots there. Now, to my ears, that doesn't really sound a lot like a guitar. It's got more of a vocal quality to it, and it sounds sampled. And to me, that's sort of what I chase. I chase warped, weird sounds that aren't so easy to place. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that. And so I put that down, and I had this whole track planned out. But then what should happen? Fuse blows in the house. I lose power on the micro. Well, I lose power on everything. So any patterns I made or I guess patches on the bitbox just went out the window. The loop that was in here just went out the window, and luckily I recorded those guitar loops. So these are, I actually came up with two of them. This is the second one. It's so noisy. You can actually hear the noise of the delay machine, and that's something a bit higher on the fretboard. And instead of bending it down, I bent it up with the delay, which I kind of like layering the one that bends down and the one that bends up together. See how they sound. And yeah, I was quite happy with how that turned out. So I kept those two. Can you hear it? All right, I think you get the idea. So I started out with those two sounds again because everything got wiped, and I went to place the breakbeat over it, and it just didn't sound right for whatever reason. It just didn't sound good. Um, so I just started mucking around. All right. Well, the next place I went to was I went kind of looking for a sort of a guitar sound that I liked, and a sort of a more acoustic sound. Actually, I lied. The actual next place I went to uh, haphazardly was the drum modules, and I very quickly abandoned that because it wasn't working, and went looking for some guitar sounds. And I was just thinking maybe some power chords, something a bit more acoustic. So yeah, I went to my go-to sort of sample library that I built of guitar sounds, and I guess to run you through those, they were not incredibly well recorded. In fact, far from it. They were recorded with a Zoom field recorder, so something that's made for picking up the entire room, which is not treated. And I used my acoustic guitar, which I haven't changed the strings on in a very fucking long time. And it's a cheap guitar anyway, so it's of no great quality. So I guess you've got two sort of far from ideal recording scenarios going on there. And yeah, so I recorded a bunch of sounds, lots of power chords, lots of open strings, that kind of thing. And it took me a while, but I ended up with a nice pack of sounds that I could use later on. And before I exported them, I put various layers of bit reduction and sample rate reduction on them. So they have this nice sort of crusty, grainy sound to them that they obviously sort of already had just because of the less than ideal recording method, and also just the less than ideal instrument. um, and yeah, they sort of got a new life out of that. And so I went with, basically used the same sounds for both pitches. I'll just take all the effects off this. And boost it a little bit. It's that. So basically, dry that sounded a little bit plain. Um, Also, uh, none of the samples that I used here are actually in their native pitch, as we'll call it. They've been pitch shifted out, down, or up, um, and that's sort of how I like it. To be honest, I could have used the exact right sample, but instead I kind of like the sound of basically the same sound being pitched up or down, like it would be on a sampler, as opposed to how it would be played. Um, yeah, that's like a stylistic decision that I like to make, um, because yeah, I'm not actually playing it; I'm sequencing it. So why try and why try and just simulate that? I don't see the point. Um, yeah, so um, those are the guitar sounds, and they went through a big chain of effects. First and foremost, just take this off. It sounds really nice with that sort of guitar sample that sounds almost like a vocal. So yeah, um, The effects sort of started out with just the mixers, or this cheap, no-name $60 mixer I got off eBay. It has this delay in it, which is just so good. Just because of how bad it is and how impractical it is. It sort of wobbles about in weird ways, like it doesn't keep timing properly. It's hard to predict sort of what it's going to sound like. It rips out a lot of the bass content out of the sound. But also it's just freakishly cool. And I can't explain how, but it just is. So we've got that cranked all the way up on there. It just sounds like degraded and shitty, and it's awesome. So it's got that on it, but also it's got, for our old mate, the cheap ass digital delay, and our old mate cheap ass reverb pedal, and we'll just bring those up. And those sort of increase and decrease throughout the song, the levels of effect. Yeah, sounds nice, doesn't it? Yeah, so the next place I went looking was for some kind of textural noise or sort of ambient sound to go behind the track. And I've got my Volca sample connected up, and that's got a few sounds in it that I was kind of looking at. Mostly this one. And that is a very strange sound. And I think that was a sequence I made for some other track, and I just liked it. And it's a track that I never finished, but I just liked that kind of weird sound that I got. So I put it in there, and it actually does make for good textures. So I use it in a lot of things. And that just goes on like this. Sort of here in the background, it sort of comes in and comes out. It gets filtered. The Farco Southern Key filter, really good filter. I think I said that last time. It's also got another sound in there, which is stop that. That isn't used. This weird thing here. Might not even be able to hear that, but it's. I'm pretty sure it's a pitch shifted piano. It's been a bit crushed, and it's got all sorts of other sort of effects on it. And that's part of the other sample library that I have. I've got a lot of like degraded piano sounds that I sometimes use, which I love. And where did I go next? I guess I was like, oh, it's got to have drums, because everything's got to have drums. So yeah, let's go there, shall we? There we go. This is our drums. Just sounds like Nintendo explosions or something. Now these are all coming from this here weird ass XR10 drum module, which probably sounds nothing like an XR10 for all I know. But some creator on GitHub sort of made this, and he's put the plans up, and they actually don't work. And it's just this weird Arduino-based thing with some very lo-fi samples in it that can be actually pitch shifted in really cool ways. So it doesn't actually pitch shift them in the normal way, it does them in this weird granular way. I'll show you. It'll be hard to... So we'll just crank our hi-hat up. You can just get them way down there, and they can sound like digital noise if they're down, or they sound like that when they're up high. And I'm not sure which pitch they're actually supposed to be, that's the funny thing. So yeah, I just played around with the pitch and came up with something I liked. The hi-hat pattern actually matches basically the basically matches the tambourine on the hot crush break, except for the fact that it's eighth notes instead of 16th notes. They all sort of fall in this kind of way where they're sort of a little bit in front and sometimes a little bit behind the grid. Look at that. You can see it there. That's sort of written in a way that I would understand it. I'm not sure if you'll understand that, but yeah, it's good to look for a bit of swing in things. Yeah, so those are the drums. And I guess the last place that I went was the vocal samples. I don't know. I was feeling like might have needed a female voice in there, something a bit mellower sounding. So here we are. Here's, I don't know, shush. Okay, here's our first sample, which is turned down.
Lined with pine needles. You're under a tall pine tree in a pine plantation. Sunlight filtering through in the fresh, clean air. It's very quiet and still, and the roots of the tree form a soft nest lined with pine needles.
So yeah, there's that. I'm pretty sure that comes from some kind of relaxation program that the company quit, which is the I'm not. I guess they were a non-profit or a charity or something like that. It was basically a big organisation which helped people quit smoking in the late 80s and 90s and such in Australia. And they put out like several products, things like CDs, which would teach you sort of how to quit, and tapes and things like that. And that was a CD that I found at an op shop when I was actually digging through op shops looking for old CD-ROMs to sample, because that's one of the things that I sort of look for, kind of old digital sort of stuff. And the other sample is this guy here.
Aardvark, abdomen. Abdominal, acacia, acid rain, adaptable, adapt, Afrikaans, aggressive, amniotic fluid, amphibians, amplify, ancestor, antennae.
Okay, you get it. Um, so basically, that is from the Microsoft's Dangerous Creatures CD-ROM. Um, Sort of an acquaintance back home in Tassie sort of posted a picture of that because he found it in a box of old stuff. I was like, man, can you send me the WAVs from that? He's like, yeah, sure, just send me that within the hour. And so that was kind of cool. And just looking through that CD, there was just lots of like cool samples. Um, and there's a whole, just a huge folder of nothing but single words, and I'd sort of just plucked all those and strung them together in one big WAV file, thinking I'd use them somehow. And so that's them. Really interesting sort of sample source. I think it's like an overlooked sample source, that sort of era, the CD-ROM era, where there was all these sort of infotainment, activity center type stuff, and it had lots of like really cool, corny kind of dialogue, I guess, on it, just like really weird sounding shit. Yeah, and old games too. Like, I'm not talking about like your classic things that you'd hear in chiptune songs or whatever. I'm talking about like weird, obscure shareware CD-ROMs and stuff like that. It's a really cool source of sounds. So anyway, I think that's everything. I think I've covered everything. So yeah, I don't know. I hope you liked it. I feel dirty saying this. Um, so I guess I won't. You know what the YouTubers say.